In May 1992, Ian Mackenzie was asked to run the Cama Coffee Montreal office, established by Fen Irvine in 1983 as a division of Heritage Coffee. Brian Martell, a boyfriend of Ian's wife's good friend Lydia, and a great lover of coffee, would often drop in. He would come in and buy Kenya dark beans in order to increase productivity at his then-present job at Kerr Norton Office Supplies. Brian so impressed Ian that on June 24, 1992, Brian and Ian made a secret trip to Toronto to meet Stuart Daw, an icon in the industry. Stuart must have seen something in Brian, as Brian was hired on the spot. This was the beginning of a relationship with Stuart Daw that grew over many years and created many wonderful memories. In August 1992, with no warning, Ian introduced Brian to the stunned Montreal staff as their branch manager and salesman. This, all at the tender age of 27. Right from the get-go, Brian and Ian decided direct sales to food service was not what they wanted. So Brian concentrated on landing small and medium-sized office coffee distributors. By February 1997, all the restaurant accounts were sold off and the bigger journey began. This meant the end to competing with future clients. In March 1997, Brian started his high-mileage life of working out of both offices, Montreal and Toronto. This meant sharing many hours with Stuart, who always had a story or life lesson to share. Brian went out with all guns loaded. He was young, eager, and fearless. All of a sudden, Brian was playing in a bigger ballpark and learning the hard way. Ian tells it as this: "I remember him working for months on this one account. The progress was slow but steady until he got the call direct from the client that Heritage would get the business. Sometimes life is good. Not. A week later, Brian was informed that it was all off. Sometimes these things just happen when the playing field is not even. However, persistence, which Brian has an abundance of, paid off, and we did eventually end up with the account and a satisfied client years later. From about 2001, there has been no client too large in North America that Heritage cannot handle. At the same time, Brian has treated the smallest of clients with the attention they need. This is Brian's greatest talent, having the time and energy for everyone." In 2003, Brian and his family made the big move to London, Ontario, as Brian took on greater responsibilities for Heritage. This was also the same weekend of the Great Ontario, USA Eastern Seaboard blackout of 4 days. The competition must have been nervous. In the last decade, Heritage has tripled in size. Wonder why? Brian will be the first to be humble and pass off the credit to sales, production, office, laboratory, shipping, warehouse, and let's not forget roasting. However, the staff will be the first to give credit to Brian for his leadership and keeping the peace amongst all of them in good and bad times. In 2008-2009, the coffee industry was at an all-time low. During this time, Colombian coffee differentials reached a high of over $1 US. This pressured virtually all other good Arabicas to follow suit. At the exact same time, the Canadian dollar lost over 20% in October 2008. There has never been a similar event in the history of the coffee exchange. This event put coffee roasters throughout Canada in a very precarious position. During this time period, the London Region Manufacturing Council invited Brian to present the manufacturing community of southwestern Ontario. He titled his presentation, 2009, the Year of the Black Swan. He used the example of currency exchange and low percentage events to warn companies about what not to do, using his misfortune as a lesson to other companies. Those close to him never tell Brian he can't do something. Not so long ago, Brian, in order to save the day, decided to pick up green coffee beans in Toronto and bring them to London. The thing is, they needed at least 8 bags to satisfy the client. That is 8 times 152 pounds for 1,216 pounds, plus Brian, fuel, and whatever else was in the Subaru legacy. In addition to being an excellent manager and salesperson, Brian is also a very patient and loving father and husband, taking time to be with family. His parents have celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, an event celebrated by their loving family. Brian did marry Ian's wife's good friend Lydia. On April 20th, 1994, the two eloped to St. Lucia. They have 2 sons, Eric and Theo. Brian balances work and family life, spending quality time with his wife and children. The Martel family host a neighborhood movie night in their backyard twice per year. The husbands on their street also take turns preparing gourmet dinners. It was Brian's turn on February 28, 2009. He is very talented with his hands and has worked on many home renovation projects, such as building fences, decks, tree houses, etc. In addition, Brian has ran 4 marathons: Chicago 2007, Ottawa 2008, Toronto 2009, and Montreal on Labor Day of 2010. Brian served on the Cama board of directors for 4 years and has worked on the initial coinage issue with Dan Stewart, attempting to get compensation for vending and OCS operators. He wrote articles in industry magazines to rally the operators, one of which was picked up by an independent think tank on property rights and published on their site. On more than one occasion, Brian and Dan traveled to Ottawa to meet with the Mint and other public officials to sway their opinion on compensation. He represented Cama on CBC Television's News World to explain the coinage issues. They gave him all of 21 minutes advance notice to make it to Radio-Canada's offices in Montreal to get ready for the interview. Brian has chaired the Cama 2001 and 2003 trade shows held in Montreal. Both shows returned more profit to the organization than any other shows previous. When Brian speaks of the success of these shows, he credits the committees he had on both occasions, their hard work and dedication. Cama recognized Brian's hard work and dedication by awarding him the Don Story Award at the 2008 Expo. Given in the name of Stuart Daw, a longtime leader in the Canadian coffee and vending service industry, this award is presented to an individual who best exemplifies Stuart Daw's fine qualities: entrepreneurial leadership, dedication, and professionalism. This nominee should also possess sound work ethics, upholding high industry standards, and have made an exceptional contribution to the office coffee service industry in Canada in terms of interest, service, and achievement. The Stuart Daw Gold Service Award proudly goes to Brian Martel.